Signature Bank Studios.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. The documentary, The Fall of Minneapolis, that came out last year made quite a splash. I mean, of course, it was ignored by the D.C. press corps because they have their story about what happened in Minneapolis to George Floyd, and they're sticking with it. They don't want any impertinent questions asked, people to consider anything other than what they concluded and reported incessantly, and then used to rationalize rioting and looting and violence on the streets of America's major cities in the summer of 2020. But you recall, thoughtful guys, thoughtful academics, after seeing The Fall of Minneapolis, like our friends Glenn Lowry, econ professor at Brown, John McWhorter, linguistics professor at Columbia, when they poured over the documentary after watching it, sort of gobsmacked. John McWhorter, for example, said Derek Chauvin didn't kill that man.
Yep. A lot of people felt that way after watching it.
Glenn Lowry talked about the moral panic on race that turns, generally speaking, a miscreant like George Floyd into a heroic figure. Now, after that discussion, they sort of walked back some of their vehemence in support of the documentary and in towards the conclusion that Derek Chauvin did not kill George Floyd. But we have a development now, and the development is that a court this week has allowed Derek Chauvin and his representation to get heart tissue samples from George Floyd in furtherance of the supposition that Derek Floyd's kneeling on the back of George Floyd was not the proximate cause of his death. And if that could be concluded persuasively, then the prospect of a new trial may be in the offing for Derek Chauvin. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by the producer of that documentary that I mentioned, The Fall of Minneapolis. She is Liz Collin, and she joins us now. Liz, thanks so much for being with us again. Appreciate it.
Yeah, hi, good morning. Good to talk to you guys again, Dan and Amy.
So, give us your take on this legal development for Derek Chauvin, and fold in, if you would, the pathologist, that forensic pathologist that apparently Chauvin's attorney did not discuss with Chauvin, someone that could have been brought in as an expert witness on behalf of Chauvin in the defense, and how impactful that was in this court's decision to allow that the Floyd heart tissue to be examined.
Yeah, we brought some of this out in The Fall of Minneapolis. There is this tumor that George Floyd had, this paraganglioma on his hip, and some doctors, multiple doctors, thought at the time this needs to be tested, and it stood out to them that it was not. That Dr. Andrew Baker did not test the tumor. And they were so alarmed that not only did they reach out to Derek Chauvin's attorney, according to correspondence, but they also even made a call to Judge Peter Cahill in Hennepin County at the time. So this was according to this new filing and some correspondence we've had with Derek Chauvin as well, some evidence that was ignored. In fact, Derek himself wasn't even aware of this until 2023, when all of these records were turned over to him. So this is part of his federal appeal. He actually has a state appeal that we've reported on just last week. That's been filed as well, a petition for relief. So this is going to allow a judge, I would say this is kind of considered Derek's first legal win. The judge has said they can go ahead and test the heart tissue and the fluids, and this will determine whether this paraganglioma is to blame. These catecholamines they secrete can lead to sudden cardiac death in some cases. It's kind of speculated that George Floyd had obviously more going on. George Floyd did die of a heart attack. That's already documented. Cardiopulmonary arrest are the first words that appear on his autopsy. So this is, just the next step here as Derek still is trying to get, a fair trial, which I think I've yet to find anyone that actually thinks he received one. Now that they've been able to hear all the facts, or to get his conviction overturned.
What did the original autopsy declare? How does fentanyl play in all of this, and how was the FBI involved?
So the original autopsy is done within 12 hours of George Floyd's death, but rather than releasing that to the public, an autopsy that in black and white says George Floyd did not die of asphyxiation. He did not die of strangulation. He had enlarged organs, blockage in his heart, COVID, this paraganglioma. He has 3 times the lethal amount of fentanyl in his system. He has a high amount of methamphetamine in his system as well. Rather than releasing that information to the public, prosecutors and the FBI are meeting for days, and it's about 5 days later that the autopsy is released to the public. This autopsy includes the word homicide, which did not first appear within the first document, and also the words basically complicated by law enforcement subdual also appear on the autopsy. And we've uncovered many public documents since about the pressure that Dr. Baker admitted to being under at the time of conducting the autopsy. People from around the country were contacting him, basically saying, you need to come to this one conclusion. He, in fact, had a phone call with the prosecutor that said, basically, this isn't lining up with the public narrative. This is the kind of case that ends careers. And these are all conversations that, again, are part of the public record.
Well, and then, the other piece of this is the Hennepin County State's Attorney's Office, too. So we had this, I remember that communication that was reported, actually, about the pressure that was being applied. These are the kinds of cases that ruined careers. That phrase stuck with me. But also, a prosecutor's office, Hennepin County Prosecutor's Office, that was beset with some internal dynamics that leads one to question whether or not they were interested in the truth, or similar to the medical examiner, interested in protecting their careers.
Yeah, actually, there's been a lot happening this week. I encourage people to go to thefallofminneapolis.com. Not only can you watch the documentary there for free, but if you click on the news section, you can see all these latest developments. But there was another recent filing in this case. Basically, it was a case of retaliation after prosecutors refused to charge the 3 other officers at all, and they were not comfortable with the higher charge against Derek Chauvin. This is when Governor Tim Walz, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz,
heard of him,
everybody knows now.
That guy.
Yeah.
He tapped our Attorney General, Keith Ellison, to take the case away from Hennepin County because they were not comfortable charging these cops, and that's when that took place. So there's some more information about that actually just came out this week as well.
Now, this doesn't mean, even if you prove that, can convince a court that Chauvin kneeling on Floyd's neck was not the proximate cause of his death, that doesn't necessarily mean that he didn't violate George Floyd's civil rights, because just to reset the table here, he's got 2 convictions. One is for murder in Hennepin County, which he's got a 22-year sentence for, and he's got violation of George Floyd's civil rights, which he's got a 20-year sentence for. So even if he didn't his actions didn't cause the death of George Floyd, he's not out of the woods. He's not necessarily walking out of prison.
Right. So you have a federal sentence running concurrently with this state sentence. So state, he has a new attorney assigned to his state case, and also Judge Peter Cahill has retired. So a new judge is taking a look at this on the state side as well. So there is a state appeal, post-conviction relief that's taking place. At the moment, also, some of that information does center around the tumor that George Floyd had, but there's quite a bit of other information in there as well. Derek Chauvin's first appeal was denied. That was on the change of venue argument that was made, and so this is basically kind of his last chance there with the state appeal. And I did want to mention, I know you did talk about John and Glenn, who I'm very disappointed in, I'll be quite honest, never having us back on after discussing at great length with our Attorney General, basically letting him lie on their broadcast. So I'd love nothing more than to be allowed to come back on. But yeah, I was disappointed with how they went ahead and retracted what they thought about the fall of Minneapolis.
Yeah, I was too. I mean, because it's your initial reaction to the film and coming to the table with a lot of knowledge about the case, like everybody had because of the ubiquitous reporting on it, and maybe some of it was misinformation, but there was a lot of awareness of it. And these are smart guys, and they process the information one way, and then look, it's fine to then say, okay, well, maybe I didn't consider this question or that question, but their sort of full retreat was a little bit strange, particularly the piece too, which is a cultural piece. It's almost regardless of Chauvin's guilt, the idea that George Floyd in any context should be elevated to heroic status is just to me it's a sort of an indication of general cultural rot, and I don't know how you walk that back.
Yeah, we continue to cover over at Alpha News. That's where I work now, alphanews.org, but just what has happened since. We've actually put out another documentary since the fall of Minneapolis. It's called Minnesota versus We the People, but what has happened since, we've had 5 first responders, 4 officers and a fire medic murdered on the job, killed on the job in a matter of 13 months in Minnesota, something that's never happened before. So this ongoing spiral that these lies have led to are also important in reporting. This wasn't over 4 years ago. We're all still living the consequences for all of this, and I just wish more people would actually recognize that.
Your husband's a former police officer, correct?
Yeah, that's right. He retired after all of this in Minneapolis, but a 32-year Minneapolis police officer. Yeah.
But did they ever rebuild the 3rd district there?
They're still still working on that. If you guys can believe it, it's going to be called a democracy center when they open.
Oh my
brother.
The police precinct again. And it's also interesting, the businesses there at 30th and Chicago are in fact suing the city of Minneapolis for a lack of police protection basically at this point, because there are no cops left, and also for allowing them to lose their business. They're blaming the city for making these asinine decisions in the wake of George Floyd's death.
Well, this is after, I remember the black residents of a particular neighborhood in Minneapolis sued the city and won for the same thing. We want police presence here, and we're not getting equal protection under the law from police. We want it. They sued for it. So, that was part of the story that was muted as well, as black residents that were victimized by looters and rioters, just like anybody else was, anybody else law-abiding was, and they sued and won. And I wonder if the decision, their victory essentially, has been enforced or not for them.
Well, the problem is they've tried to enforce it, and this is basically a mandate that they had to hire so many cops.
Right.
There was about 900 police officers at the beginning of May of 2020. There's still only like 490, I believe, is the last count, after we recorded yet another record year of homicides in Minneapolis, I will say, with still a little time to go left this year. But it's really just sad, and that's kind of the message, too, that it just did not have to happen. It doesn't have to continue either. But I don't know how it gets better if people don't tell the truth.
Liz, go. Yeah.
Well, in addition to having a husband who's a former police, you're a former reporter. And I know we talked to you when we talked about the documentary.
I'm still a reporter. I just
well,
tell the truth now for a living.
I meant like a
Mainstream
former,
reporter.
like a network affiliate type of, old legacy media reporter. And I know we talked to you about this when we first had you on to discuss the documentary, but now with a couple of years removed, or a year removed or so, any recriminations from your former colleagues about the coverage here? Any texturing of the coverage, particularly with this development in court this week?
Oh, it's always interesting. I've always received a lot of support, and I have a lot of people within the market that are watching what we're doing pretty closely, and they cheer us on behind the scenes because they know so much of what they're doing for a living is not being on the side of the good guys. That's for sure. So they'll do that privately. They won't be publicly posting about the fall of Minneapolis, but all of them have watched it, I guess, if that's the question. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that, and again, whether this is the George Floyd incident, whether it's COVID, election, I mean, you name the topic that the corporate media at this point has gotten so wrong. We've kind of even heard here locally, I don't know how much longer some of these stations even stay in business. I mean, when this is your business model to lie to the public, I'm not sure how much longer this goes on.
Yeah, and how long advertisers are going to support that. So I have a real basic question for you, Liz, because my son goes to the University of Iowa, and every time we drive in and we drive out, we see this 3-story mural of George Floyd. Who is George Floyd?
Interesting. I wasn't aware there's one there as well.
I'll text you a picture and give it. Follow me on Twitter. I'm at Amy Jacobson, and I'll send it to you. It's unbelievable.
I will look that up. Wow. That is unbelievable. Well, and this was never even, what we were trying to do is, defame George Floyd in any way. But the guy is a lifelong criminal. He spent most of his adult life in prison. Those are the facts. And also he had kind of this rehearsed act with the police. If you look at his 2019 arrest, again, we're told they've never heard of George Floyd. They've never had anything to do with him. He's the subject of an undercover drug investigation that took place in 2019, selling hundreds of counterfeit pills. He has almost a carbon copy arrest then that takes place in 2020. The same thing he's saying, the same act. He's stuffing drugs in his mouth. Nearly died, actually, in 2019 once they got him to a hospital. And his life was saved back in 2019. But yeah, those are the facts. He'd only actually been in Minneapolis. And he didn't even live in Minneapolis. He lived in a suburb. But for about 6 years. And there are at least 2 jobs that he'd been fired from in that time. And he's also the suspect in a couple of rapes that nobody talks about either, that the state seems to have lost the testing for in the cities as well. So there's a lot there. In fact, his own family never even went back to his apartment in St. Louis Park to gather his personal belongings.
Well, how many kids did he have?
He died.
I know his youngest daughter, Barbara Streisand, gave all of her Disney stock to his youngest daughter. And he had 3 funerals during a time when nobody could have funerals, not even one, let alone had 3.
That's what was interesting also. We know of the one daughter, but there were many people that then came out and said that they were children of his as well. So I don't think we have a very clear picture. But also, again, there's even more there with his family. It didn't, from who we've talked to, all I can say is that it just did not seem like he was very close with his family. And, in fact, that they never even went and set foot into in his apartment to even collect his things after his death.
That says a lot.
Yeah.
Well, maybe. I mean, and now we have George Floyd Square and George Floyd murals, and it's just really, they're monuments to ignorance. Liz Collin is a multi-Emmy award-winning reporter and anchor. She's also the producer of The Fall of Minneapolis, and she's at Alpha News now, as she mentioned. Liz, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys, and a Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you, and thank you for all that you do. And you can follow her at Liz Collin, LizCollin on X. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
As As we near the end of the year, many families in Latin America and the Caribbean are struggling just to get by. Inflation, food shortages, and natural disasters have left parents unable to